Welcome to the Religious Treehouse. I'm Matthew.
And I'm Jody.
Oh, how are you doing today, Jody?
You know what? I'm doing pretty good, Matthew. How are you?
I am also doing pretty good. I watched Wicked last night, which is new for me. Um, it wasn't as good as everyone's saying it was, but it was still a fine movie. But I thought I would let you know because you've been trying to get me to watch that for so long now.
Okay, I don't know why you had to say it's not as good as everyone says it is, just maybe you didn't share the same appreciation other people do for it.
Sure, that's a possibility. I'm not really into the world of the Wizard of Oz, so maybe that's my fault for not being um, a Frank L. Baum fan. I don't know,
Not a fault, just a flaw.
of course. But do you know what movie did live up to its hype, Jody?
Sinners,
I don't. I haven't seen that one.
I have. It's fantastic. But I'm going to guess you're going to say Conclave.
Indeed, I am going to say Conclave. No, it was a great movie, and that's what we're talking about today. I feel like if you want to learn about like what actually happens during the conclave, like what's happening in these upcoming weeks and months, there's plenty of other podcasts that are going to give y'all a much better, much more eloquent explanation. So check. I'm sure NPR already has a podcast out on it. So check that out if you're interested in that. But I think this is a great time to talk about the movie Conclave.
Yeah, what opportune timing. One is about to happen because some poor man is no longer on this earth. It's it's sad to think about life and humanity. And like, I know they have the ceremony of like sealing the doors, and then they
Mm.
have to wait a specific period of time and go through mourning. But it just really, it tripped my mind out that there's just a series of events that has to take place afterwards. And they
Mhm.
have to kind of just move on and keeping on
Yeah.
because you can't leave the role of Pope empty for long.
No, no. I think the longest there's been without a pope was like 3 years. I think there's
Oh,
like a real long conclave type event way back when, and I think they like made adjustments to like how long it could be. So now there won't be more than a few months without a pope. But I could be wrong here. Like
it's
again,
crazy.
we're not talking about actual conclaves, but I think exploring the religion of this movie and how it portrays Catholicism and the choosing of a new pope is really interesting, and I look forward to talking about it. But
Let's get into it.
perfect. First, I want to talk about the score. I thought the music was amazing.
Mhm.
Um, I've heard a lot of people, well, a couple of people I've talked to thought that it was kind of boring. I was captivated the entire time. And I think most of that was because the score was so good. I don't know if it was a cello or bass, but that consistent note that it hit throughout the entire movie, I think just like brought me in. So I really enjoyed the score.
It really played off the moments in the movie so well. It
Mm.
reminded me of like reality television because they have scores in reality TV to kind of accentuate the moments and really emphasize what you should be feeling during them. And the score did that so well. I kept like moving around because like I could tell when something was about to happen and I would kept getting excited. It was exhilarating.
Yeah, yeah. But no, the movie opens with the previous pope dying or dead, and we kind of walk into that scene. Do you have any thoughts there?
I mean, right away, I just felt like we were immediately in it, and I was trying to explain to Connor who is who because that like I immediately lost who was who. But to me, right off the bat, because they kind of start talking about the conclave and who the next pope would be, and I
Mhm.
got the feeling that like Stanley Tucci was going to play the role of like a reluctant leader. Um,
Right.
from that
The-
scene because they kind of talked about it a little.
Right, and not very reluctant. We should say at this point, spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie, we'll be talking about the spoilers.
Yep.
uh, but yeah, no, Tucci definitely gave off the reluctant leader vibes from the beginning, and then he became the not so reluctant wannabe leader throughout the movie. But I thought what was really interesting about that scene is I don't think that Pope was ever named. I think they never said who that Pope was. It was just the dead Pope. And I thought that was a very brilliant choice to kind of take this movie outside of history and kind of place it within its own atmosphere, saying it's not that this Pope is, the story that we're talking about. So we're talking about some Pope that, exists in this story. And I thought that was really brilliant. And I think that's what, we've been talking about the Exodus a lot lately in our podcast. And I think that's part of the beauty of naming Pharaoh. In Moses' story, like the Pharaoh isn't ever named, but it's just the Pharaoh. So by creating this story without specifically naming the, most high, most recognizable figure, I think really creates a story that's kind of exists outside of time. And I think how they did that was really interesting.
I think it also kind of ties into the line said towards the end of the movie. The church isn't just tradition, the church isn't just the past, the church is what it does next.
Mm,
Because the entire movie, they're focused on what the old Pope wanted, what the old Pope wanted to do, but they don't give him a name.
right.
And what they're trying to find is the next name, the next Pope. And I didn't even think about the fact that they didn't name him. That's crazy.
Mm.
Wow.
But yeah, do you have any other thoughts on that opening?
That opening, just right away, I was taken aback by the simple decadence that is this Vatican depicted.
Mm,
Um, through everything, through clothing, through the set design. Initially, upon viewing things, it all seems very simple. But then once you get into the nitty-gritty details, and that was the first thing I noticed about going into this Pope's chambers, is that it's black, white, and red. Only three colors. So simple, right? They're marble walls. They're marble floors. They're very specifically chosen design aesthetics.
mm,
And you see the same thing in the robes they're wearing. Like they're very simple to look at, but that looks like good cloth, good material. And that seemed to be kind of a commentary, maybe on the church itself, but specifically the church in this is that
yeah.
it's designed to look simple until you look closer.
Yeah, no, I think there's a line between humility and decadence that that the Vatican presents for sure. Because you've got the massive art, the beautiful, beautiful artwork everywhere throughout the Vatican, alongside with you know a lot of money that the Catholic Church brings in. So there's a lot going on there for sure. But yeah, I think, and we'll touch on this throughout the movie. Um, the way that this film negotiates with Catholicism, I think, is really interesting, and the things that it points out and the things that it kind of says this is what we want to talk about is really interesting to say the least.
No, it definitely, I didn't feel like I was being spoon fed what they wanted, but it felt very gentle the way they were trying to communicate these points to me.
Yeah,
Um, I'm I'm so excited. So what stuck out to you next?
right. So I think we get introduced to Ray Fiennes there, who I think was excellent throughout the entire movie. He did fantastic. I think he was perfectly cast. And we also get introduced to John Lithgow. Um, and I didn't love John Lithgow in this, if we're being completely honest. I think that's because I associate him with like a silly, goofy character, and trying to see him in like a very, very serious role, it was hard for me to like wrap my head around. So that was interesting. But no, other than John Lithgow, I thought everyone was fantastic.
I think John Lithgow really served his role well, and I found him very believable in this. He was kind of unassuming. Like he wasn't the one they were worried about when they started thinking about who would be the next pope.
Mm,
Like they weren't worried about Tremblay. They were worried about Tedesco. And but Tremblay was doing a lot of underhanded things. So he was very unassuming.
Hmm.
just in his demeanor, in the way he acted and reacted to Ralph Fiennes. Like Connor and I were sitting there, Connor being my husband, and Connor would just go, "Oh, he's acting so good. I really hate this Tremblay guy." And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, he seems underhanded and sneaky.
Hmm.
He was so good at it." But I definitely not my favorite role of his, but to diverge from his usual, I think he did pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think maybe we should just follow each character's storyline and then
Yeah,
go back and forth? I feel like that might be the easiest way to do this
let's
because
do it.
Lithgow, what Tremblay was his name, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
He gets found out that the Pope, he was the last meeting with the previous Pope, and he had essentially fired Tremblay, but because he died, that didn't really get out. And then it found out that Tremblay had bribed other cardinals to vote for him as Pope, right?
Yeah.
So that was very, interesting, showing the inner corruption of the Catholic Church. Like I think this movie did really good at presenting Catholicism as like a genuine and good and loving religion that does a lot of good, but it also didn't shy away from internal corruption. That's perhaps what the Catholic Church is infamous for, as well as so many other religious institutions. So I think it walked that really fine line of hey, this is a beloved institution that like does a lot of good, but also has a lot of corruption. And I think by showing Lithgow's bribery that he was trying to do was a great way to initiate that.
And also bringing in the sister
Mm-hmm.
into the Vatican to upset the other Pope hopeful. What was his name? Adeyemi,
Oh yeah.
and bringing her in and the underhandedness of that. He said all the right things. When Ray finds character, when Lawrence confronted him, Tremblay would say all of the right things to get him out of that situation. And it wasn't until Lawrence and the sister compiled the evidence in the envelopes, which I thought that was iconic, them setting
Mm.
down envelopes at every single table setting in the cafeteria. And then him being exposed, but then he managed to talk himself out of the bribery thing. So the nun steps in, our dear sister, and says, "Well, he also brought this other nun in to like expose Adeyemi, and he just can't dig himself out of that hole." It
Right.
isn't until everything is put forward and we're faced with the complete truth that he has to step out of the shadows.
Mm.
But because Lawrence wasn't going to expose who Tremblay had been bribing, like all the other cardinals were going to turn on Lawrence.
Mm.
Because why are you going to keep these guys in? It was that confrontation was so well done.
Yeah. And I think for a movie that is focused so much on male cardinals and it's a movie about men essentially to use there's only two or three female characters out in the whole movie and to use them in such pivotal scenes each time, like the woman's role in this movie was to kind of weed out the potential candidates for the next papacy. So like each time, like the woman's role was to say, no, this guy is corrupt. No, this guy has problems. And I think that was very interesting how they used the women's role repeatedly to serve that function.
You know, I was screaming at the screen the entire time, though, going, "Will someone talk to the nuns?" Like at the beginning of the movie, they're trying to figure things out. They're trying to figure out if Tremblay had been fired, this, that, and the other. And I'm like, will someone talk to a sister? My goodness, these women are moving around the entire Vatican, quiet as mice, probably hearing and seeing things.
Mhm.
And I feel like it took a while for someone to actually talk to a nun.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
But yeah, and then speaking about Adeyemi, was that his name?
Mhm.
Right. Like his the fact that he potentially has a son from a much earlier relationship, I think again is getting at the point that the Catholic Church is so often criticized for the sexual immorality that many of the priests and uh, cardinals and bishops have been criticized for, and to bring that into the movie, not in a way to say, oh, this is all Catholics are bad, but admitting that, hey, this is a problem that the Catholic Church deals with. I think they did that really well. Again, they
Yeah.
said this is a problem, a critique of the Catholic Church, but again, the Catholic Church isn't amounted to only this.
Yet another scene where I was screaming at the screen because he's standing there, Adiyemi's standing there telling Lawrence, we were kids. And Lawrence looks at him and goes, she was 19. She was a kid. You were 30.
Mm-hmm.
Can you please just, and then he said, all hope is lost, like with a scandal like this. But also, I think Lawrence saw, he, Adiyemi didn't take accountability. He
Mm-hmm.
was even trying to excuse it then. Like, we were kids. It was 30 years ago, blah, blah, blah. And the commentary on accountability, on taking responsibility for your actions and how
Mm-hmm.
even these men of God are not exempt from that was
Yeah,
very powerful and poignant. Like, yeah, hold people accountable.
yeah,
Do that.
it did really good at showing the humanness of all these characters. I think a lot of times when we think of the Pope, when we think of high-ranking religious or government or whatever type of officials, people that rank highly, whenever we think of them as their position. We forget to think of them as a person. And I think they did really good at presenting these as people. And there are so many scenes of the Cardinals smoking, and that's just not something that you think of. That's not something that you would imagine, and it just really emphasized the humanness of all these characters that often gets overlooked.
The shot of the pile of cigarette butts on the ground, and Connor and I were hollering when Tedesco pulled out a vape because, yeah, of course, Tedesco's pulling out a vape. Have you met him? He thinks everyone should be speaking in Latin
Yeah.
and it should be a Roman Pope. Like, it's crazy. No, the human aspects really were what made this movie so fantastic to me because I felt like I could empathize or see how each character ended up where they were doing what they were doing.
Mhm. Yeah, no, for sure. Do you have any more thoughts on Tremblay or Adiami before we move on?
No,
Cool. Do you want to talk about what's his face, the bad guy now?
Tedesco?
Tedesco. Yeah, I thought
Tedesco.
Tedesco.
Man rolled up in a cape. That thing was swinging around and he was not coming to play. He's like, I'm taking the papacy. Just you wait. Just all you wait. And I was like, this man is wild. Is he's the bad boy.
Mm.
I liked how each character kind of fit into like maybe a high school archetype or like they just fit into like different little sections and you could take these characters and place them into other situations like running for student body president
Mm.
and they kind of embodied certain it was insane. I really appreciated though how like even though Tedesco was like the worst candidate, like from my point of view,
Mm.
they didn't go as hard on them as they could have.
Yeah. No, Tedesco, I feel like was given very little screen time, like comparatively.
Mm.
Like he had some talking points, um, his introduction, his him talking at the lunch scene with Ariami, um, and then kind of his closing scene in the gallery where he talks about him being opposed to Islam and all that. He was given very little talking and very little screen time.
Well, after what he said about Islam, I was ready for him to shut up. So I
Yeah.
think that was a smart choice.
Yeah, I think another critique I have of this movie is that they presented, this was kind of a conversation between progressive and conservative ideologies,
Yeah.
and they certainly gave a lot more conversation and thought towards the progressive Catholic ideologies, and I feel like they kind of presented the conservative ideologies of Tedesco as kind of being monolithic and not very deep. He said this is a caricature of the conservative viewpoint is, and it's not to say that like there's certainly Catholics and high ranking cardinals that would agree with a lot of what Tedesco had to say, but I do wish that they fleshed that out a little bit more instead of just saying, "Hey, this is the conservative opposition."
I see that. I agree. I think that point is valid. But I think the role Tedesco played was supposed to be so far right, and
Hmm.
Adeyemi was supposed to play something more right moderate.
Yeah,
And that was supposed to be like Adeyemi's role. Um, to more look at it from that angle. Because I think you also see the same thing with like Bellini. He's
hmm.
so far left that
Yeah,
he's like, we can't let them win. This is a fight. And Lawrence is more moderately left. And he's like, it's not a fight. Like, we need to, like, this is a, we're one person, like, we're one group. Like, we need to come to a consensus kind of thing. It's not like we're out at war.
yeah.
And then so I think there were just each pope served to show a certain degree, but I agree with you because I think they could have fleshed it out more.
Hmm.
And but I don't think that was going to happen with Tedesco. I looked at Tedesco and I was like, that man has met Andrew Tate. Like, no, full stop. Like he's just kind of the worst. And I think there needed to be the worst, like, the worst candidate
Hmm.
in order for people to have a unifying person to hate while also realizing, oh, I don't like this candidate either. I don't like that. Like it needed to start very black and white
Yeah,
so you could get into the gray areas of everything.
yeah. No, it definitely. No, I see that. It definitely started black and white with Tedesco, and you thought Bellini was going to be good to some extent, and until you saw that he desperately wanted the papacy, despite him saying no, no, I don't want it, and him also being bribed by Tremblay. So like it did go, like what I really appreciate about this movie is that while it did take more so the side of the progressive, especially at the end, and we'll talk about that. While it did kind of say like, "Hey, no, this should be a progressive continuation of the church," it did well at showing that conversation between progressive and conservative theology, and I think this is a very interesting movie. Not speaking as not a Catholic, I would love to talk about this movie with progressive and conservative Catholics and get both of their opinions on this entire movie because I think it did a really good job of showing how those conversations can happen. And despite Bellini's far left and um, why can I never remember his name? Tedesco and Tedesco's far right ideologies, the fact that they're still part of the same church, they're still part of the same religion, I think did fantastic at showing that religion isn't monolithic, that religion has so much depth and and contours to it that isn't just, oh, this is what a religion is. It's there's so much happening, not just with Catholicism, with all different religious traditions.
Conclave really felt like a mirror being held up because I felt I could see some of these same conversations happening in churches I had been to.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have run into the like both ends of the spectrum. They're in the same religion, but
Yeah.
the way they approach it, their ideologies are so different. And these two
Yeah.
people can't agree, even though they're following the same system of belief.
Yeah, because what often I hear, online and in the message boards and stuff like that is when you get the progressive people talking with the conservative people of the same religion, it often comes down to, well, they're not really Christian. Well, they're not really Jewish. Well, they're not really Muslim because they believe something far different. But what this movie never did is we never saw Bellini saying that Tedesco wasn't Catholic. We never saw Tedesco saying that Bellini wasn't really Catholic. We saw, very staunch disagreements for sure. But at no point, at least in my recollection, did they negate each other's, you know, Catholicism or negate each other's devotion to God, which I thought was very interesting.
No, and I really think the only time they negated someone's like position within the church was with Tremblay because he got fired.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was it. But like never did they disparage each other. I feel like on a faith-based platform.
Mm,
Does that make sense? I'm sorry.
yeah,
My brain
yeah.
just short-circuited. No, this movie was a mind bend because I didn't know who I was cheering for. I didn't know who I wanted to be Pope. It
Mm.
was crazy. I had a prediction at the beginning and it ended up being completely wrong. This movie was just amazing.
But yeah, and then to close out the Tedesco conversation, I think what he really harped on was the infighting between the progressive Catholics. Is that it very much presented a unified conservative faction of Catholicism, and it showed the fracture between much of the progressive ideologies of Catholicism. And I thought that was very interesting until the very end when, after the explosion came and they all kind of met together saying, and Tedesco was talking about how, we should have a new crusade with Islam, which was, awful. But everyone saw that it was awful. Everyone saw that, oh no, other than his most staunch supporters, said, oh no, this is horrible. There should be some, tolerance and inclusion. Um, until Benitez spoke up and did his speech. But no, I think the role of Tedesco was understated in the movie, but imperative to the how it played out.
Definitely. Shall we discuss Bellini next?
Yeah, we talked on him a little, but yeah, what are your thoughts on Bellini?
I
Stanley
mean,
Tucci, gotta love Stanley Tucci.
gotta love Stanley Tucci. Stanley Tucci can do no wrong except in the Lovely Bones.
Oh,
Have you ever seen that?
of
No,
course
but
not, Jodie.
he's a phenomenal actor, and I started off the movie. I was like, this is our reluctant Pope. This is our man. And progressively, just like we've already talked about, the opening up into his mind and delving into this, because like Tedesco, he has a war in his mind that he's fighting. Tedesco's fighting it on one side, Bellini's on the other. When Lawrence got 5 votes and
Mm.
Bellini talked down to him for like getting votes, I was like, that's wild.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Like, can you see no validity to why anyone would vote for Lawrence? That's You can't be mad at him for having 5 votes. That means people believe in him, and maybe he would be better suited than you. And
Yeah.
then it just felt like he was projecting onto Lawrence, like, I know you have ambition for this. You must have ambition. And the entire time he's like, I don't want this. I don't want this, but you have ambition. Like, projecting much, sir?
Yeah. And I think Lawrence had more ambition than he let on as well. He came up with him being Pope John pretty fast, uh, like when that was asked of him. But but no, Bellini was definitely not reluctant at all.
Oh, he showed his face. It was what I'm taking the bribe. I was just disgusted. I was like, how dare you?
Yeah,
Ugh. And I kept going back and forth. I was like, do I want him? Do I not? Do I want him? Do I not? I don't know.
Yeah.
I I still think maybe I would have been satisfied with that ending. I would have been like, oh, that makes sense. But I think I'm even more satisfied with the ending we did get.
But yeah, do you want to move on to Lawrence now?
Yeah.
Lawrence, yeah, Lawrence, the main character, obviously. Ralph Fiennes, fantastic job. And I found his presence very good. Like he was there to get the job done, and he didn't really care. Like he obviously had a preference for a more progressive pope, but he was there to get the job done and to get it done well. And I loved how much drama that he was just taking in. He loved the drama, like very clearly, even though he was like, "No, don't give me the drama." His friend that kept giving him information, I don't remember his name, but every time he would come and Lawrence would be like, "You can't tell me I'm sequestered. I can't know information from the outside world, but tell me what happened. Go interview this person. Give me the details." It was very much he was very much interested in the drama, which I thought was so funny.
So Real Housewives coded. He was giving Lisa Vanderpump. She'd be like, "No, don't tell me the gossip. Tell me the gossip." Like it was wild. And you're right. His secretary guy, who I couldn't decide for the longest time. I was like, is he feeding him correct information? Is he in cahoots with Tremblay? Is he in cahoots with Bellini?
Oh, I
Was
didn't
there
even consider that.
Well, I'm sick and twisted, and I think everyone's betraying everyone. I was like, obviously, this movie is about corruption and greed, which it was to an extent, but
Hmm.
I think there was a more hopeful message at the end of it all.
Yeah.
Anyways, I just could not decide for the longest time if I trusted him or not. And then Lawrence was such a little Nancy Drew. He was
Hmm.
such a little Nancy Drew investigating, going into the sealed dead Pope's quarters so he could go around in there. And then he had a breakdown over the glasses. It was wild. I made a joke to Connor because after he has the breakdown over the glasses is when he finds the letter. And I told Connor, I was like, watch, it's going to read, "Dear Lawrence, now that you've crashed out over my glasses. Here's how to get rid of Tremblay." Because it seemed like the previous Pope set up everything for Lawrence to find, like
Yeah.
in my mind. Like he laid out almost everyone's, I felt like he laid out Tremblay's destruction for sure.
Hmm.
He knew Tedesco wasn't going to get it. And I'm fairly certain he wanted Benitez to get it.
Yeah.
Like the previous pope haunted the entire narrative, and poor Lawrence was his errand boy. You know, some people are supposed to be shepherds, some are supposed to manage the farm.
Yeah.
And Lawrence was a great farm manager.
No, he was. He did his job fantastic. Um, for sure. And I loved his conversations on doubt. I thought that was very interesting because he mentioned the Pope's problems with doubt, not doubt with his faith, but doubt in the church. Whereas it seemed like Lawrence had much more doubt in his faith, but and he was like open with that, like he wasn't like hiding that from anyone really. But people still liked him to some extent. He still got votes and all that. Um, and I think his sermon at the beginning, or yeah, at the beginning of them being sequestered, I thought that was fantastic, and it was the center of the whole movie. Like that is what the movie was about. The the Can I read it? I think I have it in my notes. I'm gonna read his sermon. It was so good.
Okay.
Is that all right? Are you all right with me
Yeah,
reading the
let's
sermon?
do it.
Let me preach through the words of Lawrence. Okay, he said, St. Paul said, "Be subject to one another out of reverence for Christ. To work together and grow together, we must be tolerant." St. Paul said that God's gift to the church is its variety. It is this variety, this diversity of people and views, that gives our church its strength. In the course of a long life in the service of our mother, the church, let me tell you that there is one sin I've come to fear above all others: certainty. Certainty is the great enemy of unity. And I think that's the line that really gets that's the movie. That's the whole movie. Certainty is the great enemy of unity. That's what it's getting across. But he goes on. Certainty is the deadly enemy of tolerance. Even Christ was not certain at the end. My God, why have you forsaken me? He cried out in his agony at the ninth hour on the cross. Our faith is a living thing precisely because it walks hand in hand with doubt. If there was only certainty, and if there was no doubt, there would be no mystery, and therefore no need for faith. Let us pray that God will grant us a pope who doubts. Let him grant us a pope who sins and asks for forgiveness and carries on. I think that's the center of the movie. That is what the movie is about. And I thought that was so well done that I feel like if you heard this sermon as a Catholic, as a Christian, as an atheist, as someone outside of religion or Christianity to any extent, you could hear that sermon and you could find beauty and truth in it. And I really appreciated that there's beauty in doubt and there's beauty in uncertainty. And I thought that was a very well put sermon.
It was poignant. It's been living in my head rent free, so thank you for reading it. I felt like I was hearing Ralph Fiennes again. It was heavy. It spoke so loudly and so clearly. And
Right, because the whole thing, Bellini was so certain that the next pope should be progressive, it should be him. Tedesco was so certain that the next pope should be conservative and that it should be him. That the certainty that was found in everyone was, you know, like it was just the center of the movie. Like the movie was great. The movie was fantastic and all that, and we should go watch it. But you can also just watch this one scene and figure out the whole movie. Like that was it,
yeah,
in
go
my
watch the whole movie.
professional opinion.
No, definitely. I do think the rest of the movie though lends itself to that scene, and it gives it so much more, especially once you get to the end.
Right, right. And
But
yeah,
it was wild.
do you have anything else on Lawrence, or should we move to Benitez and the end of the movie?
I have so many thoughts on Lawrence, but if I sit here and I talk about him, I just think I might get a cease and desist from Ralph Fiennes. I will say that he did have ambition, but he was very good at hiding it.
Oh, he certainly had ambition. His this sermon was about how he wants a pope who has doubts. Like that is him. That is Lawrence. Oh,
But
but for sure, yeah.
I just felt the way it was played, I don't think it's supposed to be like obvious to you
I don't
right
think
away
he.
that
I don't think he realized it. I don't think
yeah,
he realized he was talking about himself.
he wasn't. He didn't
Yeah.
realize it at all. And I really don't think you realize how much ambition he truly had until he comes up with the name John.
Right. And then he writes his name and votes for himself. And when he puts his name into the bucket, that's when the whole room explodes. And like, yeah, I mean, I felt like what was happening in that scene was from Lawrence's perspective. He saw that he voted for himself, and then the room exploded. Like, if you're a cardinal and that happens, like, that's got to feel like a message from God. Like, nope, we're not voting for me anymore.
Like, and we're gonna just turn this train around because
Yeah.
I'm not doing this. But yes, let's talk about the Pope at the end of the movie.
Right. So, this is the big spoiler. So, Benitez is identified as a cardinal in secret. Like, he's not known as a cardinal because he does his work in war zones and wouldn't be safe for him to be identified as such. So he kind of shows up unexpected. I thought he was going to be a reporter or someone trying to sneak in to like get the details about what's going on. I was certain that's what was going to happen. But I don't know, he was genuine. He was a real he was a real cardinal, I suppose. So yeah, I'll let you. Where do you want to take this?
I mean, there was just so much mystery surrounding him from the beginning. And the way they even shot the scene, I still, they, whoever was, I don't know who the director was, but some of the shots for this movie like blew my mind. I had to pause, but
Mm-hmm.
they had him shrouded in shadows to begin. So you didn't like get a clear look of his face for like, I felt like a while. Like I felt like you kind of saw him.
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't really clear till like a few scenes in. And it I don't know. I loved the Benitez character from the beginning. I was like, this is great. When Lawrence confronts him and is like, who'd you vote for? And he's like, for you. And Lawrence is like, don't do that. And he's
Yeah.
like, I gotta vote with my gut, man. Like he he was a good character through and through, but because you didn't know much about him, you didn't feel like you could trust him
Right. Yeah.
because there was all this stuff about the clinic and stuff.
Yeah. Until he got his scene after the explosion, after Tedesco's anti-Islam rant, where he, stands up and does his speech saying like, no, I know what it's like to be in a war zone. I know what it's like to have compassion and all those things. And then like very clearly the whole room turned and was like, oh, this is our guy, which was fascinating. And then when he gets elected in as Pope and he chooses innocent as his name, oh, fantastic. Like Pope Innocent. Like because like he had done no wrong. Like at no point is he like we've seen Lawrence break into the Pope's quarters. We've seen Bellini take a bribe. We've seen Tremblay bribe people. We've seen sexual impropriety with Abayami. We've seen Tedesco just hate people. Like and then Benitez is just innocent, and I think that was a fantastic name choice.
It was the perfect name choice, especially considering the big twist at the end and the fact that if the other Cardinals knew, they wouldn't think of Benitez as being innocent.
Right. So it's identified that after he's elected as Pope, that he's been that he previously was supposed to go to a clinic in Switzerland. I thought he had AIDS or something, or it was a conversion therapy camp or something like that. I was convinced, like, okay, it's a gay Pope. But when the twist was that he was actually intersex, that was like a much bigger twist and very fascinating that that was the choice that they would choose. Because at no point in this movie was sexuality or anything like that or gender or any of those conversations. That was never a part of the entire movie. So I was completely thrown for a twist when that came up.
No, but it was an undertone.
Well, sure, it
It
did come up every once in a while as like, do we hate gay people? But
it was
no,
a heavy undertone to me,
yeah,
especially with the depictions of the Cardinals all having these nice like rooms and setups. You don't even see where the nuns live. The
mm,
Cardinals get to sit at this very fancy kitchen and dining table and they get to make these decisions. The nuns
yeah,
are working in the background
mm,
and making this entire thing functional and operational, but they don't have any say.
yeah,
Um, sorry, I'm getting heated. But like, so to me, it was a very heavy undertone. And when they started talking about, okay, a clinic in Geneva, and then when I heard the hysterectomy part, I was like, oh, oh yeah. Oh, and there was also like this slight thing of like Benitez won't get changed. Well, yeah, Benitez won't get changed because it's kind of a little foreshadowing to you
Mhm.
that like there's a reason why, even though he biologically looks male,
Yeah,
he has female sexual organs. It was the best reveal. It's you don't see intersex people being brought into the conversation often.
right.
And for the next pope to be someone intersex is so crazy to me because you think about Catholicism and yeah, the pope is a dude, but if you think about other world religions, people who are intersex have been regarded as being more spiritual, of having two souls.
Sure.
And there are cultures around the world that uphold intersex people as being more divine because of how they were born.
Mm.
And I thought that was kind of I I felt like that was a nod to that a little bit. Especially in a religion where that's not a belief that's held.
Yeah. No, there's definitely like even Lawrence as being progressive, like there's no way that this could get out. Like this news still had to be secret because I was still far too progressive for even any of the progressive cardinals, any of the progressive members of the Catholic Church. So no, very interesting choice.
It's wild to say it's like it's they're not progressive enough when that idea and that belief system is one that goes back like hundreds of years for some cultures.
Sure.
Like it isn't a progressive thought. It's the way they were traditionally, but traditionally within the Catholic Church, that is an opinion that's held.
Mm.
It's wild to me. That was such a good reveal.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a conversation starter. Like there's so much to talk about with that for internal Catholic dialogue, for sure. And then to close it out on him saying that he lives in the uncertainty, he lives in the in between. Again, harkening back to Lawrence's sermon, like again, this is the whole point. This is a pope that lives in the uncertainty, and that's what Lawrence wanted. That's what we were convinced through his sermon. Like, oh, this is fascinating. To live in the uncertainty is, spiritually interesting, spiritually fascinating, spiritually engulfing. So, no, very fascinating reveal. I think there's a lot to be said for both Catholics about this film and for non-Catholics about this film.
Yeah, I think I want to talk to more people. I didn't watch Conclave when it first came out because I was like, too trendy. And you know me, I'm a hipster at heart. So couldn't do that. But now I want to discuss this with people and find out what they think because when it initially came out, it was such a big conversation. And
Yeah, but I had heard nothing about the twist at the end, like not a single thing, which I
no,
thought was fascinating. Because like usually I hear about like, oh, spoiler to some extent. I'm like, that's because that's what I do. I look up movies so I don't have to like be surprised. But I knew nothing about this one, and it was a real shock.
it was such a good one. And I think I need to stop being such a snob when it comes to movies. Okay. If you're up for an Oscar, I'll watch.
Yeah, no,
All
I
right.
think I think that movies are kind of the new art form. Like when we look at 17th, 18th century art, like it's beautiful and it does its own thing. But I feel like movies have kind of taken over that form of expressing art to people. And I think that's why I'm so drawn to film and movies of that extent, because it does the same thing that artists, good films, good movies, do the same thing that artists from hundreds and thousands of years ago try to do, but it's the updated modern format for a lot of people. And I think that's why I really enjoy these movies, especially ones that engage with religious themes, because they're able to make comments on types of things such as this.
While we're here, I would like to shout out because we talked about a lot about the actors. Edward Berger was the director. Shout out to him. Peter Strawn, Robert Harris, both were writers. Um, I think the art director, costuming, set design, it was it was such a good movie
Oh,
that
fantastic.
spoke through so many different layers and the way it came together was really well done. Now, I guess we need to ask ourselves, Matthew, is
Yeah.
this a religious movie or does this movie depict religion?
Jody, you knew exactly where my head was at. I think this one, I feel fairly confident that this depicts religion.
Yeah.
I don't feel like this is a religious movie, but it like I don't see any way that this induces devotion or any other type of situation like that. But by depicting how this fictionalized world with an unnamed pope practices a religion, practices Catholicism, I think it does fantastic at showing what that religion is and how we can think about that religion.
Hard agree. This movie depicts religion through so many different lenses.
Yeah.
You see it from all different sides, through all different shades, so many different views. You see the dirty nitty gritty, you see the joy and the hope, and there is an appreciation, I think, there for the religion they are depicting.
Mm.
And I want more movies like this.
Yeah.
Give me more.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you all for listening. If you've seen Conclave and you have thoughts, please reach out to us and let us know what you think about it as well. We're on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Bluesky, TikTok. We're on TikTok. And you can watch and listen to us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, or Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts, or send us an email, thereligioustreehouse@gmail.com. And please let us know what you think. Bye, all.
Bye.